Welcome everyone. This is Danny and Karl with GetWisdom, and today we're going to continue with the channeling series. And today Karl is going to channel Frank Zappa, who many will know was kind of an iconic figure from the '60s and '70s. He did a really famous song with his daughter named Moon Unit called Valley Girl, which he thought was kind of a social commentary, but it turned into like a cute popular song back in the '80s, early '80s. So he's our subject for today. We have 7 questions, and given that he's from that time, the flower power and the summers of love and the hippie movement and all that kind of stuff. This is going to be kind of thematic characteristics of this channeling somewhat, and kind of an interesting time because the changes that time brought forth, I think, really weren't expected. Down the road, looking back on it, I think people were expecting a different outcome from that movement, and we've discussed this a little bit in the past. So maybe Karl, you could talk about that a little bit before we get started. And thanks for joining us too.
Okay, well, thank you, and thanks to all of you who are watching this. I think this issue of those times and the cultural milieu are an interesting phenomena in terms of human behavior and the kind of idea of a movement to begin with. What is a movement exactly?
Right.
And I'm more and more sensitive to this than ever because my understanding of history has shifted a fair amount in dealing with the deep issues we engage with now in our quest to find deep truths about things. It's usually the case there's more going on than meets the eye. It's not just herd instinct. It's not just human similarities where people kind of get in alignment and then start to work together more and more, and then the bandwagon gets rolling, right, and people jump on because they want to be a part of it and all those things. I think some of that is natural, but some of it might be unnatural. So I think this will be an interesting one to look at. We haven't really done so for that whole, whatever you want to call it, the counterculture.
We've kind of nibbled around the edges a little bit, with some of the other channeling subjects we've had. Yeah.
But I did live through it personally for the entirety of it. And I remember all the little incremental steps, all of the changes in music, the changes in focus, the
anti-war movement.
The anti-war movement was a huge central element of it. And all the cultural trappings,
right,
the wild clothing,
right,
and the
long hair,
and the beards and, sideburns and all those things, the burning bras and all the things that happen, women not shaving and, there was all sorts of not using deodorant. There was a lot of interesting phenomena that happened culturally, and the formation of a lot of communes, to really separate from society officially and formally by going it on your own, and little enclaves and so on. So there was many manifestations of this. And of course, the drug culture that came up pretty largely in the overall scheme of things. And so they were times of, you could say, fomenting opinions politically, culturally, and spiritually in a sense, although it wasn't really a spiritual movement. It was a more pragmatic one of kind of wanting to somehow break out without a lot of focus behind that and what it might mean. It was more a rejection of the current norms.
Right.
And then doing flagrant things to show you're not buying it, you're going to be radical. You're
right, the sit-ins.
Yeah, we're going to get in your face and shove it to you and this sort of thing, which, we see elements, periodically through time like that when people become disaffected. But if there's nothing solid behind that impulse, it doesn't get very far ultimately. So you could ask, where did that go? So maybe we'll get a divine perspective about it today.
Right.
I think it could be very interesting.
Okay. Yeah. One thing that I did ask a question about, he had a kind of a little tumultuous period in his life in the winter of 1971, December 4th and December 10th. On the first date, there was a fire, and I think it was in the UK. Somebody launched, or it might have been Sweden, but anyway, it was not in the United States. Somebody shot off a flare gun in where they were performing, and the whole place got on fire, and they lost thousands of dollars worth of equipment, musical equipment, amps, and all the speakers and everything. And then 6 days later, at another performance, some crazy guy jumped up onto the stage and threw him into a concrete orchestra pit that was like 17 feet below the stage. And he had multiple fractures, a head injury, and he was actually in the hospital for a while, recovering. And he's a pretty stout fellow, big guy. And for this to happen was kind of amazing. And I thought, what a strange, there was like, I smelled a manipulation in all of this, given that it was so close together. So we're going to ask about that too. And so yeah, he should be interesting. Well, we don't have a very long intro today, so maybe that's a good thing, and we can go ahead and start.
Well, I think it's a good thing. I would rather hear from the authority here anyway.
Yeah.
And so we'll go ahead and connect to Mr. Zappa and see what he can share with us about his life and times, and maybe shed some light on the world condition now and what it all means and what we can take away as a useful kind of lesson for us and how to live and how to make the world better. Maybe what we can do to contribute. So that's always kind of what we're after. And we get it in different ways with different sort of contexts. So I will reach out and get in the state of consciousness I need to connect. And I do this through the creator of all that is. I don't use my own psychic powers to do it because I want to have protection around the work. And I want to have a guarantee that I'm reaching the intended target. And I will get that by going through the Almighty. And I purposefully do it because there are many imposters that are lurking about that try to preempt anyone reaching out intuitively for any reason, even just doing meditation. They will try to connect with you and interact with you. And if you're capable of receiving messages and information, like doing channeling, you will hear from them, and they will pretend to be an exalted figure of some kind, and they may make up a name, but they'll give you a story that they're, a high-level spirit and so on, an ascended master of old, or what have you. And it seduces people into thinking they're doing something worthwhile. And it's an intentional corruption, a sidelining of the intuitives. So more than 90% of channelers are doing that. They're not talking with who they think they are, and they're being hoodwinked. It's very sad, and I take no joy in saying this. It bothers me every time because I know it hurts people. I don't like hurting people. I don't want to be a critic and a complainer or anything, but this is serious business.
Yeah.
And this is part of the deliberate manipulation of humanity. And it's ironic because society views the spiritual folk, people like myself doing healing work, channeling, as sort of a fringe element, and regard us with suspicion, with skepticism, if not scorn, thinking it's all our own misguided ideas and so forth. And the irony is that the interlopers who are really running things and constraining our world and threatening our world fear the intuitives as much as anyone because they haven't been subjugated yet, at least not entirely. they're still able to use their minds, their intuitive gateway to the higher realm. And they can find out things that way. You can go and look at the Akashic records. You can go and look at the extraterrestrial worlds. You can talk to extraterrestrials, observe them, and get knowings about their agenda and all of that, because that's the power of intuition. It's everywhere at once. You can connect to anything that you at least have an awareness it's possible or that you might want to connect with. If you're completely in ignorance of something, you won't tune to that wavelength because your mind isn't going to go there. That's why knowledge is so valuable. But this makes intuitives dangerous. So it's ironic. They're high on the list, as well as people who nose into conspiracy theories, so-called, the hidden truths that people bump into and raise questions about, but are usually dismissed by the mainstream. And so they're tarred with that broad brush. They're, tinfoil hat people and so on. And that group as well are high value targets for manipulation by the extraterrestrial alliance, because they're not behaving like the sheep that everyone else have become, herded into little groups and minded and made to be complacent. That's the number one weapon of the interlopers. Make people complacent. Hear no evil, see no evil. Just give me my sugar, and I'll be happy as a clam, and so on. So that's why I do what I do the way I do it, and we'll see what happens. I'll connect now to Frank Zappa, and then it'll be up to the questions and the answers.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
This is Frank Zappa.
Thank you for joining us. When did you transition to the light using the calendar we now use, and what happened when you transitioned?
My experience following my death for presumed medical reasons was partial. I became an earthbound spirit for a considerable period. And this was because of lack of spiritual preparation and having within great inner fear about what might come. I wanted to protect my family and friends from my misgivings as best I could. But in the end, one's death is a highly personal experience and is different for each individual. It usually happens with but meager preparation. In being ready for a new adventure and looking forward to returning home, that is the great loss in your society, and drifting away from the religious instruction and the religious message of having an immortal soul and being from the heavenly realm and returning to it on your demise. The non-believer is literally cursed with their own lack of expectation. And perversely, it is human intention that governs what you do as a spirit when you leave the physical body. The body is like an anchor that grounds you literally through the density of physical matter. And your consciousness is tethered to the body and will likely continue to express itself through the capability of the body to have thoughts emerge and then take action through choices to manipulate speech and movement and so forth. Once the body is gone, it is a quite different experience. And many have trouble in navigating. It was my good fortune to be rescued by one of your students who was using your Lightworker healing protocol, which includes an excellent series of steps for rescuing spirits struggling as earthbound in limbo. This happens 1/3 of the time with people who pass. So it is extraordinarily common. It does not speak to worthiness. They are not being judged and rejected from on high in making their way back to the heavenly realm. It is simply that it is their journey to make. They must be able to raise their vibration, raise their sights, in a sense, and be prepared for what comes, so they are able to cooperate with the messengers from the light, who always come as an escort to give encouragement and help point them the way. They must see that and begin to cooperate themselves. They cannot be commandeered. It is always the choice of the human where they wish to be and what kind of experience they wish to have. People simply do not know this and have little appreciation for how much they govern with their own lack of awareness, largely being an impediment to living a fuller life, being more successful, and reaching greater states of happiness and contentment that come from being in spiritual alignment. That is the gift of being in a divine partnership that is a living, breathing, ongoing relationship, even from moment to moment. Without that rescue, I would still be there in all likelihood, in the darkness, tumbling about and being targeted as well for mockery and derision, having my foibles, my weaknesses, essentially trotted out and thrown at me over and over and over again. My failings and even my triumphs scorned and twisted around in their meaning to denigrate them and denigrate me in the bargain. So this was a time of great torment and unpleasantness. It is a blessing for you to spread the word through those you have helped to train to follow in your footsteps, to bring specific and powerful procedures to bear on this issue in ways that will enable the divine to come in and do what they can to help with healing, to raise the vibration of the struggling spirit and enable its safe return home. This is because of free will, not punishment by the light. People have to be allowed to have their experience according to the rules of engagement until they are back in the higher astral plane. They will be fully in charge of everything that happens, and without an awareness of what is going on, are ill-equipped to navigate on their own. Someone from the human side being their advocate, calling forth the divine realm and its resources, requesting a series of specific interventions by knowing how the divine realm can deal with such dilemmas and the various levels of healing needed to undo the liabilities that have enabled that spirit to become earthbound through vulnerability. This makes all the difference and enables a smooth rescue and safe passage back to the light. Even in very difficult cases, the protocol has the wisdom within it to request the divine realm to keep at it, to keep working at the problem, and never give up until there is a successful rescue. This is powerful and intelligent outreach, and is what can make all the difference, and is the reason why this protocol is important for the rescue of humanity as well. Those in the living are in peril. Not only will they have to cross that divide when they pass eventually, they must navigate while in the living to do things to help one another and raise up the human family. That is why I came into life to begin with. So I am very, very grateful. There are those like you among the living who are enlightened enough to work with the divine realm and contribute to this shift in consciousness for the betterment of humanity and its rescue.
Okay, thank you. Was your death orchestrated by the cabal or the alien contingent now running things on Earth?
There were a number of attempts to orchestrate my death. My downfall ultimately was the accumulated woundings that came again and again and again, all during my career, with many setbacks, personal, financial, and health. This is typical in taking on those humans who can be of great help to their fellows in raising others up and giving them encouragement, doing something that encourages happiness and the exchange of love, and especially thinking more broadly, thinking outside the box in some way or another, to resist the mediocrity of uniformity and being slotted into mediocre levels of engagement with life as you know it in the physical. It diminishes all who struggle in this way, having but routine tasks in eking out a living with relatively few sources of fun, let alone joy. It requires much human ingenuity and creativity to provide such things against this backdrop of drudgery in wanting to get ahead, but being constrained across the board in every sphere of human endeavor by obstacles put in your way by the grand cabal of darkness that grips earth and holds it back. The artists are a ray of hope. They are a display very visibly and perceptively on a deep inner feeling level, and also through opening the heart as well as the mind, with encouragement for all humans and a reminder there is something more. Your life is not the be all and end all of possibility. There are other wonders, and you can sample these and share them, at least as a listener to music, for instance. And in that listening experience, be raised up and literally in a different place, more in tune with something exalted, not only something different and perhaps exotic, but lofty. For that is what music represents in an ideal expression. It is a divine message, something coming through the originator, through the composer, through the artist and performer, to share the reality of Creator's love as an underpinning and everything comprising the universe and its organization. Music is an elaborate display of symmetry, contrast, and dimensions of love, both present and absent. It is in that respect an analog of life itself, with its ups and downs, its complications, its challenges, and moments of reward, personal satisfaction and accomplishment, and even moments of bliss when love, especially, is shared deeply by people with a close union, whether husband and wife, intense lovers, or parents and children. Music is an expression of love through mathematics, organization, and form that delights the ear, because humans are organized to be a love antenna. It is inherent in your makeup that you are a receiver, much in the way a radio or television is designed to detect specific wavelengths that are anticipated to be broadcast. Humans are designed to respond to musical interval melody through tone progression and rhythm as a framework. The whole of music theory is a recognition of this architecture and its potential. It is part of your makeup to recognize it when it comes your way as something special. That is a divine gift, analogous to the appreciation of natural beauty visually, or any of the sounds of nature that can delight the ear. My experience as an artist was interfered with again and again in order to constrain me, to take the wind out of my sails, so to speak, to give me setbacks, to discourage progress. This was opposed to a significant degree by the divine realm. And that was because I lived for the most part in divine alignment. I knew inherently within my being there were things to be valued, that life is not trivial. It is not something to take for granted and to cheapen through being self-serving, taking shortcuts, taking an easy path. But I worked hard at honing my skill as a composer and having a deep inner yearning to be an innovator. That was my life purpose. I came into life, into being, to take on that role and even be an iconoclast, but with the intention of getting noticed and to have a following so that I could stimulate others to be willing to be bold, to break the mold and not be complacent and settle for the lowest common denominator. And this is why I was interested in the complex, in the novel, and in pushing the frontier and combining sounds and form and musical genres in new ways. It is because I was a seeker and a bringer of truth to push back the frontier. That is what earmarked me for resistance. The Extraterrestrial Alliance plays many games with artists of all kinds to sideline them, to maneuver things so they are tempted by drug use, with alcohol, with unwise and potentially illegal sexual liaisons, all of which can blow up in their face and discredit them, as happens again and again. So my so-called accident that took place was a physical assault, as is on record. What is not on record is that the assailant was manipulated through a ramping up of inner anger to do the deed. It could easily have been fatal, but it did hobble me for a considerable period of time and left me with lifelong difficulties and impairments. There was good fortune coming my way as well, and my inner resolve to prevail, to overcome the physical problems that I suffered, were in divine alignment and helped augment the protection that was bestowed. Those combinations of energies kept me going and extended my career. The fire was another example. of an attempt to sabotage my career. And it had its intended effect. It was a setback. It caused great inconvenience and held me back materially for a considerable period in making up the losses. There were other attempts as well. And it was good fortune and divine oversight, sometimes on the part of others involved with me also, that combined in order to provide the protection for my operation as head of a musical group for whom I was responsible. This is an object lesson in human survival under hostile opposition. You are only allowed to exist for so long as the interlopers don't care you are around. If you do something to get their attention they do not like, you will be in the crosshairs, and they may well design a scheme to sideline you. It happens again and again and again. You see this with all of the great artists who die young or who seem to sabotage themselves through addictions or have illnesses that do the deed. That can be the result of a conspiratorial ramping up of inner karmic liability through onboard dark spirits under the command of the extraterrestrial alliance. They have weaponized the fallen angelics to give them specific marching orders to attack certain people, in particular with a vengeance. This was the karmic component coupled with a desire to finally be done with me that caused my demise in the end. It is a fate befalling many, but is always assumed to be natural. Disease is natural in the sense it is real, it is a physical demonstration of discord within the body that can be diagnosed and traced to see its various components, and in some cases ameliorated with treatments, others not. What is unseen by the mainstream is that the karmic underpinnings are what are most important. The fact that there has been prior trauma, often in other lifetimes, making a person vulnerable, that need not rear its ugly head in a particular lifetime, but will certainly do so if there are dark spirit attachments in the person. They will push the karmic buttons again and again and again to cause problems physically. And this is the origin of the great majority of physical illness. It is karma. When the darkness potentiates this vulnerability, few will be invulnerable and remain unscathed. You can fight back against these twin evils. That is why we are talking to you, because you are on that quest. if you were simply curious about the afterlife, about learning details of a former prominent figure, we would not be talking with you at all. There is a higher purpose for you showing up and asking the questions you are asking. We need to work together, you who hear these words and us in the light, to save humanity from the darkness. It is why you incarnated in the first place. We will do our part if you do yours.
Okay, thank you. It was reported that you were an atheist. You recalled your parents being pretty religious and trying to make you go to Catholic school despite your resentment. You felt disgust towards organized religion, Christianity in particular, because you believed that it promoted ignorance and anti-intellectualism. Can you tell us now about religion and what some of us who are atheists can do to repair the harm done by having religion forced upon us when we were young?